everyone, I'm Heidi and today I'm going to be connecting the lecture on scientific racism and propaganda with chapter 3, representation of American Indians. To start off, they both show how people in power have used science, media, and even culture to create these false identities or false ideas about race and justify inequality. And what really stood out to me was how these ideas were presented as the truth, even though they were really just ways to control and separate people. The first part that kind of explained scientific racism was in the lecture. We learned about how race was often described as a biological feature based on skin color, facial features, even hair. But also, race has been used as a way to classify people into groups that were seen as either smarter or dumber, civilized or not. And during the 19th and 20th century, I believe, scientists they studied skulls and claimed that the shape and the size of the cranium determined intelligence, which created the false science that was called phrenology. And it labeled Europeans as more intelligent while describing black people as inferior. And even though phrenology was proven false later on, it still set the stage for other racist beliefs, like the ones used in Germany, and where propaganda focused on physical features such as the shape of the nose and to mark Jewish people as ugly or dangerous. And these examples show how science and media really work together to spread these stereotypes and just further convince people that physical appearance could measure human worth, which it doesn't. But the connection to the reading was that it focused on how American Indians were represented in media and culture, and it also connects closely to what we see in the lecture, because just like scientists, they once used biology to rank races, and early American culture used images and stories to place Native people into very narrow categories, either as uncivilized or as people who needed to be saved. And the representations weren't neutral, in my opinion. I feel like they were justified. They used them to justify taking land and power away by showing Native people as less human or less advanced. And both the lecture and Luther show how representation is never just about appearance, it's about propaganda that was used to make racism seem natural or scientific. And a real life example would be from the lecture that connects to this one's one drop rule in the United States and shows how laws defined who was considered black or white. Saying that even one drop of black blood made a person black, this classification system just came from the same racist logic that used biology to separate and control people, like we read earlier on. And even when laws changed, like I think it was the Loving versus Virginia case in 1960 something. I don't really remember, but it legalized interracial marriage, and the ideas behind these rules didn't just disappear, because the way that people viewed race and the privileges attached to whiteness continued and still continues to influence society, just like the long-lasting images of Native Americans that Luther writes about. But yeah, both the reading and the lecture taught us that racism often hides behind knowledge and representation, whether it's a scientific chart or a movie image. Both stereotypes look real, and learning about scientific racism helps us recognize that these ideas weren't accidents, they were designed to justify inequality. And as Luther in the lecture show, understanding where these images come from is the first step in breaking them apart and creating more accurate, respectful representations today. But yeah, that concludes my response. Thank you.